Sallaz. Sallaz. Nobody said it right.
Let's wait for a few more minutes.
Okay. That's fine.
Oh, by the way. How you doing?
We haven't killed her yet. They just lie all the time. They know I'm not around.
Yeah. I was on vacation last week. So.
The topic today is Autism Spectrum, or as most people will say, Autism Spectrum Disorder. All right? And today we do have a speaker, Leigh Anne Sallaz.
Very good.
Is our disability specialist here at Weatherford College. She will give us a quick overview or synopsis, if you will, of what ASD, Autism Spectrum Disorder, is all about. And then, of course, and this will be open to questions and answers. Hopefully, you have a lot of questions for her, and because I know she has a lot of answers for you. How you can interact with your fellow students, or how you can interact with your colleagues who might have this type of spectrum here at Weatherford College and beyond. So again, I will introduce to you, or I give you, Leigh Anne Sallaz.
I'm Leigh Anne. I work in the disability office. My supervisor is Dawn Calden. I've been here since 2004. I work part-time. I also have a son with autism, besides the fact that I work with many autistic students up here. So having a child with autism takes a lot of time, and it was just too difficult for me to work full-time and take care of all his doctor's appointments and his therapy and his special schools and those type of things. So I'm part-time. I have a bachelor's degree in family and consumer science from Texas Women's University. But really how I learned about all the autism world was through my son. That's really why I got this job. I lived it he'll be 22 next month. So I've been doing this for a really long time. And I also have another son that's at Oklahoma State University, and he's majoring in aeronautical engineering. He'll be 20 in June. So that's my background. Before we get started, I want to remind you, I know several of you have had our students and have had students with autism, and when we get up to talk or ask questions, please don't use names. FERPA laws prevent us from identifying these students, so if you can just give examples or hypothetical situations without identifying any of these students, I sure would appreciate it. So, Autism Spectrum, it's just like it sounds. It's a big spectrum. There's really low end of autism and there's a really high end of autism. Generally at the college level, you're going to get more of the high end autism. You're going to get maybe the top third. The third of autism and Aspergers disorder. Depending on who you talk to, Aspergers is part of the spectrum, Aspergers is separate from the spectrum. In any event, the behaviors are very similar, just on a lighter scale. And also within the spectrum, even from the low end to the high end, you're going to get variation of behaviors. So you can't say, oh, if you're at this part of the spectrum, these are the very things that you're going to see always. You know, it's a very nebulous type of diagnosis, and each kid is different. So it just kind of gives you an idea of what kind of behaviors to expect, maybe some ways that you can work with these kids, but to expect each kid or student to behave a certain way just because they have spectrum is not realistic. You really have to get to know each one of them and try to figure out what their, how they function and how they respond to best help them. So that's the spectrum. Like I said, Asperger's really is supposedly at the top of the spectrum, but the latest DSM manual that came out, and I don't actually remember when it came out, a couple of years ago, they split Asperger's off from the spectrum. I know, my thoughts too. But that's the way it is. So actually, medically speaking or psychologically speaking, as my understanding is that Asperger's is a separate entity from the autism spectrum. However, in my opinion, it all rolls together into the spectrum. So what I thought I would do is tell you some challenges that I've noticed with working with the students up here. That's what I do. That's my job, is to work with the at-risk students that are registered in the disability office. For sure the ones with autism, and then also some others with different diagnoses that would be at risk. But I for sure work with the autistic kids. I want to tell you some challenges I've noticed in working with them, and then give you some suggestions on maybe how you can handle them in the classroom a little bit better. And then if you have any questions, I'll try to answer your questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll find out for you. Okay? So obviously with autism, the first thing you think of is social challenges, and they definitely have social challenges. They have challenges with students outside of class. A lot of times the higher end on the spectrum, they really do want to have friends. You know, it's not that stereotypical autism that you think of where they don't want to talk to anybody and they want to sit in their room and they just want to, play on their computer. The higher end, they really do want to have friends and they really do want to interact, but they don't understand the rules. They can't figure out jokes sometimes. They can't figure out banter sometimes. Sometimes they can't just shoot the breeze about whatever topic is at hand. They have these obsessions that they want to talk about. Not everybody wants to talk about Minecraft all day. This is my life, okay? I talk about Minecraft all day, every day. So that's a real challenge for these kids, and they tend to get upset about it, and they get depressed about it. They want to make friends, but they don't know how. So that's one way. Also, socially, these students tend to have trouble in group projects, group settings, and sadly that is part of college, is to be able to work in a group, work collaboratively with other people. It tends to go three different ways. One is that they're so introverted that they have no desire to be in that group and they're very upset about it and they shut down and they won't do anything. Another way is that they really do want to be in the group, but again, they can't figure out the rules to interact in the group and it becomes a problem. Or they're very much in control and they take control of the group and nobody else can do anything else in the group but that person. And again, they get upset, group's upset, the person with autism is upset. Generally the project gets done and it gets done really well, but one person didn't. So that's kind of how it goes with the social issues at school. And also they tend to have trouble, and again, this is a spectrum issue. So for me to say, they tend to have trouble. They may not, but they could have trouble with like literal interpretations of what you may say in the classroom, or what if somebody's trying to tell them a joke, they may not get it. Or they may try to make a joke, but it doesn't make sense to anybody else because they don't get the rules. When I first started working here, I worked with a boy that was very, 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 very literal. And one of the first things I had to do with him was to proctor a test for him. It was in my office for some reason. I don't know why we weren't in the testing center. I can't remember. But I could either do it in my office or we could go down to the kitchen and do it. In my office, the desk was very cluttered. You know, there was stuff all over it, computers and papers and everything. And I said to him, do you want to take the test in the kitchen or do you want to take it here in my office? But that might be hard. And I meant hard because it's so cluttered, you know, you can't really, you know, it's the back side of the desk and you can't pull the chair right up to it and all that stuff. And he said, oh yes, it's hard. It's hard. This will be good. Hard. Yeah. It's hard surface. You know, so it's that kind of thing. You know, they'll misinterpret what's being said because they're so literal. They can be so literal in what they hear or what they say. So that's some of the problems with social things. And again, the obsessions, like Minecraft. Do y'all watch, let me see the name of this. My boss watches Atypical on Netflix. Any of y'all watch that? You watch that? It's penguins, right? Isn't that what he wants to talk about all the time?
Well, it was about 6 months ago when I watched it. I watched the whole series and thought, oh my gosh, this is so real.
This guy has Autism Spectrum, and he has a typical girlfriend. That's the politically correct term for normal, you know, no autism. So typical girlfriend. And his obsession is penguins. And that's all he wants to talk about is penguins. And so she has to put a limit on him on this show. Like he can only talk about penguins 3 times today, or 2 times today, or 4 times today, and then he has to talk about something else. So that's also an issue with socialness at college, is they want to talk about their obsession. Not everybody else wants to talk about their obsession all day long, and they don't understand the social cues that not everybody wants to talk about their obsession. So that's some of the social problems. Time management and self-discipline, which has to do with executive functioning. For whatever reason, there tends to be a lack of executive function with people with autism. So making themselves do something they don't want to do, you know, like homework or study for a test or extra credit, you know, they're so, let's say they're into playing video games and they may love it so much, but they're not able to make themselves stop and say, okay, I've been playing video games for 2 hours now, I need to go study for my test. Or, you know what, I'm on the cusp of a 70 in this class, I need to go do that extra credit so it'll push me over the top. You know, they may want to deep down inside, but for some reason they just can't make themselves do something they don't want to do. And that goes along with taking a class that they're not interested in. So let's say you have a student that is super into math, loves math, really good at math, wants to major in math. Well, to get a math degree, you also have to take English, and you have to take history, and you might have to take speech. They don't see the reason for it, don't see the purpose, and therefore it's very hard for them to make themselves do something that they don't see the purpose in. You know, I try to talk to them and I'll say, well, to get a degree in math, you've got to take all these other things in order to get that degree. And your mother is paying for this class. You really need to take this class. And you have to have a certain grade point to transfer to wherever it is you want to transfer to. So you really got to make a good grade in this class. Very difficult for them. You know, they don't see, they're a math person, they don't see the point in English. Why am I having to do this? This makes no sense to me. There's no purpose for this. So that's some of the executive functioning problems that I have. I do have them try to write down stuff in a planner, but lots of times, you know, it's on there, but then it's never opened again. Again, you know, they can't go home and make themselves do something that they don't want to do. Also, planning ahead, executive function, planning ahead. I've got a project due in 3 weeks. This project is worth 50% of my grade. I really should start working on this project now so that I can have it all done by the time the grade is due or the project is due. It's very difficult for them. You know, in their mind, this project is due April the 25th. So April 25th it is. That's when I'm going to start thinking about this project, April 25th. Instead of backing it up, and saying, okay, this thing's due April 25th, I've got to really start on this 4 weeks in advance to get it all done. Very difficult for these kids to do. Another issue that I think is a challenge is environmental. And a lot of people don't think about this too much, but these kids many times, and again, this is a spectrum, so just because a lot of kids, autistic kids, have trouble with this doesn't mean that all of them do. But lights, sound, touch, emotion, they tend to feel things more. They see things more. Like these lights actually pulse. I can't see it. But for some kids with autism, they can see it. They can see every one of them. They can see every pulse. So they're sitting in class, trying to pay attention, trying to take notes, and this light is pulsing for the whole hour that they're in there. It's very distracting. That would drive me nuts. I heard one story one time of a kid in high school. Only one class did he have trouble in. All the other classes he was great, but one class he melted down in every single day, and they couldn't figure out why. So they brought their psychologist, autism specialist in to try to figure it out. Come to find out, he sat like in the back corner of the class, and there was a clock right above where he sat, and it ticked. Nobody else could hear it, but he could hear it. Every day. Tick, 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 tick. Drove him nuts. He had a meltdown every day. So they're very sensitive to those kind of things. Touch, sometimes, if you touch them on the arm or touch them on their hand, sometimes it feels like you just bored a hole through them. And, it's very upsetting for them. So they're going through an assault all day long of sensory issues. And people tend to think of autism as emotionless. How, they may have a kind of a stoic look on their face, but honestly, they have emotions. And they have very deep emotions. They just don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to identify it. They don't know how to regulate it. They don't know, how to calm themselves down. I really feel that they have very deep emotions, maybe deeper emotions than we do. They just don't know what to do with it. And the last thing of challenges that I see is consequences of their actions, either of their actions or of their inaction. They don't seem to understand that there's going to be a consequence, good or bad. And I can tell them, this is going to happen. If you do this or if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen. And they'll, yeah. But then whenever it does happen, they're shocked. They're shocked. They just don't seem to understand. If I don't do these 2 papers, I'm going to fail this class, and if I fail this class, I'm not going to graduate in May. It's just like they just can't get it. My son's that way. I can tell him, let's say, I don't know, if you touch that stove, you're going to burn your hand. Don't touch the stove. And he'll go right over and he'll touch that stove, and he's shocked that he burned his hand. I'm like, I told you were going to burn your hand. So they just don't seem to understand very well the consequences of what they do or don't do. So that's a problem in college. You have to get these credits, you have to take these classes, you have to have a certain grade point to graduate. And it's hard for them, I think, to see such the long-term, down-the-road thing for college. So those are some of the challenges. Some of the suggestions that I have for you. Again, with disability in college, you are not required to change your class for somebody. You're not required to lower your standards. You're not required to give them less homework or, less tests or let them take the test home and everybody else takes it in class. That's not college. They have to do everything that everybody else has to do. You're not required to change your class. However, there are some things that you might be able to do to make it easier for them without changing your class. One thing that, actually, I had a question on this one. Sometimes they don't understand what they're doing in class is inappropriate. So if there's inappropriate behavior, you need to call them out on it, but you don't need to do it in front of everybody. The whole class doesn't need to witness you calling out this person because they probably did not realize what they were doing. Take them out in the hall after class or before class, or ask for them to meet with you in your office hours, and you can be fairly blunt you know, these kids normally don't deal in tact. You know, I'm fairly blunt when I tell them, you know, this is what's going on and this is what we need to change. I'm nice about it, I'm not mean about it, but I'm pretty upfront. So I had a question that says, when you have an adult over 18 with autism spectrum in college that displays inappropriate social behavior such as sneezing very loudly and strongly without covering his mouth, I think, sending mucus across the table or desk onto other students, leaving the classroom 4 to 6 times a class period, saying they need to go to the bathroom, picking their nose and wiping it on the desk or their clothes, and interrupting the teacher or classmates, what's the best way to address this? Take them out later and say, here's what's happening. You're sneezing 6 to 8 times and blowing your nose very loudly. It's very disruptive for the class. You need to take care of that before you come to class or take care of it after class. You are allowed to go out of class one time during class to go blow your nose. That's a private thing, needs to be done in the bathroom. You know, I'm pretty blunt with these kids, you know, and they're lots of times rule oriented. So if I can set it up as a rule, going forward, here's the rule. You need to take care of it before, take care of it after. You get one time that you get to quietly go out of class and blow your nose or sneeze or pick your nose or whatever it is you need to do. Usually once I set that up and I'll say, this is the rule from going forward, this is the rule, they're usually pretty good about it. If it doesn't work out, call me or Dawn, we'll talk to them. Or if you're not comfortable doing it yourself, call me or Dawn and we'll take care of it. Because I do it all the time. That doesn't bother me a bit. So that's one thing, you know. Another thing we talked about is try not to touch them if you don't have to. And I know we don't touch our students, like hug them or touch them or anything, but sometimes if you're just talking to somebody and you touch their arm or you touch their hand, that can be really upsetting for them, especially if they have high sensory issues and they don't realize that you're about to do it. Let's say you come at them from behind. It can really send them into like a fight or flight type thing if they don't realize you're going to do it and you touch them from behind. So try not to touch them. I try not to touch my kids in any way. But I did have one student that was exactly the opposite. He had autism, but he sought out hugs and high fives, and you know, he had to hug everybody he saw. So we had to set up some rules about that. You know, we talked about side hugs. We talked about instead of hugs, maybe we do a high five. You know, try to set up some social rules that will help him still get that input that he wanted, but in more appropriate ways. When these kids act out in your class, generally they aren't doing it on purpose. They're not trying to be irritating. They're not trying to, you know, disrupt the whole class. Usually there's something that's happened before, a predetermined thing that's stuck with them, and it's just, you know, aided their anxiety, and they, for whatever reason, something that happened in your class is the last straw. So when something happens, try to stop a minute and think, what is causing this? Why did this person just throw his backpack across the room? You know, what's going on? It could have been something that happened earlier in your class. It could have been something that happened out in the hallway before. It could have been something that happened 2 days ago, and they're still, you know, ruminating over it. Generally, in my experience and with my son, there's something that's causing this to happen. He has fever, his throat sore, you know, are we going on vacation next week? And he's really anxious about it. We went to Florida last week because my younger son was on spring break last week from OSU. I did not think we were going to survive the week up to that vacation. My son was so anxious. I was like, I think it might be just better to stay here. He was so anxiety-ridden, and anything we tried to do, brush teeth, you know, wash hair, anything, was World War III. And it was because of his anxiety over the vacation. It had nothing to do with brushing his teeth or washing his hair. So I always try to stop and think, and you may not be able to figure it out, but stop and think, what is going on? What just happened 5 minutes before this blow up? Or what just happened at the beginning of class? Or did something happen in class 2 days ago? You know, are we having a test that he's upset about? Something that's really, 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 really important in autism world is theory of mind. Have y'all heard of that? theory of mind? They've heard of it. Theory of mind is understanding that other people think differently than you do, or have different opinions than you do, or don't have the answers to the questions. It's kind of fascinating. You know, it never occurred to me until I learned about it that someone would not understand that someone else can't feel your headache, you know. In your classes, another thing you can do within reason, remember you're not required to change your class. You know, the standards are the standards. Your class is your class. These are the things you have to do to be able to pass this class. But within reason, if you can try to be structured, unstructuredness tends to send these kids over the edge. If you can be structured, if you can be predictable, if you said, we're going to read in class, you know, pages 22 through 23, and then we're going to stop. But then you had some extra time, so you decided to read through page 30. But you said you weren't going to read that far, and, you know, in high school, I've heard of some kids that when they got to that point, closed their book. They're done. That's what you said. You said we were going to read through this page, and now you changed it. But I'm done. So if you can try to be structured without changing your class, if you can try to be predictable, if there is going to be a change, if you can give plenty of warning about the change, and sometimes you just can't. Sometimes it is what it is, you know, there's nothing that can be done. But if you can give a little bit of warning, that would be great. And also, going back to the group projects, I forgot to say this, if you are going to have a group project, if you've noticed some other kids in the class that have been kind toward this person or friendly or seem to be accepting of some of their quirks, if you maybe could put them together in the group, that might make that go a little bit better. Group projects are just the bane of autism, let me tell you. And as we talked about before, set boundaries for appropriate behavior. If you're not comfortable doing it, I have no problem doing it. Just let me know. Dawn can do it. We do it all the time. Generally, they don't get upset about it. It's just like, oh, okay. You know, they had no understanding that what they were doing was inappropriate. Sometimes they continue to do it, and we have to address it again. But for the most part, once it's addressed in a pretty upfront, kind but upfront way, it's usually resolved. But you can just let us know if you have trouble, and we'll take care of it. So that's not a problem. So basically, that's my thoughts on autism in college. You know, these kids are usually the ones that are able to come to college are fairly intelligent. Some of them are super smart. But because of all these other issues, it makes it really difficult for them to navigate college life. So if you can just try to get in their heads and try to see the world the way they see it, try to think the way they think, it makes it a lot easier. Because they are unable to think the way we think. But we can try to think the way they think.
We are going to open up for questions and answers. We have a microphone over here so that we can capture, Larry can capture your voice very clearly. You step up here and ask your question.
Leigh Anne, I just have one. You've covered most of them. What if it's a student who is not registered with you?
I would call Dawn and see if she knows of this student or if they're registered and they forgot to tell you. We have a lot of times, you know, they'll come pick up those accommodations and that's as far as it gets. They're in their backpack. You know, they don't turn them in. So they may actually be registered with us and you don't know.
This student says that they're not, that they've cured themselves. So they're not.
You can't make somebody report to us. In college, it's a self-reporting thing. You know, in high school, or in public school, they're seeking out kids with special needs, and they usually come to you or come to the parents. But in college, it's a self-reporting thing. If they don't want to report, you can't make them.
So can they still, if they're not reported to you, can they still take advantage of the services that you offer, or do they have to?
They have to register with us.
Can legally, you know, give me a 3 to a 12-year-old, and I know exactly what to do, and I can call the parent, and we can get an individual plan developed and work with the student. Can we address issues with the parents or not?
No.
That's what I thought.
No. Especially if they're over 18.
Yeah.
If they're under 18, I would probably give Dawn a call and see what she recommends. If they're over 18, they're adults, and there's no legal way that we can speak with their parents.
Okay. That was my thought.
just very briefly, again, autism spectrum disorder is very complicated to some extent. As Leigh Anne mentioned to you, there are some of them that are diagnosed very early in life, at very early age, and most of the diagnostic method is through observation, and then maybe the parents become a little bit more aggressive, then maybe we can do some blood genetic testing on those areas. And then some kids could go without it, without being diagnosed into adolescent, and then it becomes even more difficult at that age. And as an adult, it becomes even more difficult at that stage of diagnosis. It's always very imperative that we step up the game at a very early age in life. Now remember, she mentioned to you that we have the high end of the autism and the low end. The low end one you can pick up easily because they show a lot of all this spectrum and characteristics. But the high end one tend to have a lot of time we say, oh, maybe it's ADA or ADHD, and they are of high intelligence. A lot of them have IQs of 70 and above, and very smart and talented. So we can let them ride through it. Then when they become adult, the problem begins to manifest itself a little bit more and making it even more difficult to intervene. So again, we have to be very careful, as well as being very emotionally intelligent to approach these kids in your classrooms or in your daily lives or even as your friends.
And that's true. I mean, it is a spectrum. So you've got the really low end and you've got the really high end. In my opinion, and what he said, the low end, when they're pretty young, you're going to figure out something's up. They're not meeting those developmental milestones like they should, and you're going to figure that out pretty soon. The high end, Aspergers, and the high end of Autism Spectrum, that doesn't start showing up till they get in school, and maybe even college, depending on how functional they are, how well they've learned to cope. Because when they're younger, on the high end, when they're younger, they're meeting all those milestones and everything's going well and they have, little play groups and everything. It's when they get into school and there's rules and there's structure and there's expected social behavior, that's when it starts to show up. So, some of these kids, it's high school or even college or maybe even workplace before they ever realize that there's a name for their issue because they were able to function well enough to get by.
More questions? Welcome this way.
Yes, question?
I have one from online. It says, I work here and I have an autistic daughter. Should she be telling her teachers that she has autism and other issues?
At the college or in high school? At the college? If she's in the college, it's her choice. If she wants to tell the teachers, she doesn't have to. Again, they're adults. If they're over 18, did she say she was over 18?
It does not mention.
Doesn't say. If they're over 18, it's self-reporting. They need to take care of business. Personally, what we do, we hope that they will come and register in our office. Then what we hope to do is get permission from them to tell their teachers. Send an email out that says, hey, this student's going to be in your class this coming semester. The student has autism, just a heads up. Because I think for you guys, if you realize somebody has autism in your class and they start acting erratically or you start having behavior issues or inattention problems, I think it makes it a lot easier for you to feel sympathy for these kids and try to work with them, try to figure out what's going on or get with us. If you don't know and they're acting up in class and being irritating, it just makes you mad. You're like, come on, this is college. You shouldn't be behaving this way.
It's surprising. You're prepared. When someone comes and you notice I'm prepared. I know what to do. I know how to handle it. I've got structure ready. I put everything on the board, how we're going to go. I know those things. But when we don't know, that's what's hard for them as well, because I don't have that structure prepared for them. I don't have people that I know they can fit into the group. I'm going to always put them in that group.
Exactly.
So it's so much easier, and I think their experience is much better when we know.
And that's actually something made me think. In public school, as I said, they're coming looking for you. The teachers are reporting to the diagnosticians, hey, I think this child has whatever, ADHD or autism. I think you need to take a look. So these kids are used to everybody coming to them. Well, when you get to college, it's a different law. So in college, they have to self-report and they have to take care of business. And if they're having an issue, they need to come tell Dawn. hey, I'm having an issue, I need to, I need this or that, or they need to tell me, hey, I have this issue, what should I do? And I can say, hey, we need to go talk to the professor. And I can't tell you how many times I've taken them by the hand, and we walk over to the professor's office, and I tell them, this is what you're going to say, and I push them in the room, you're going to talk to the professor. They don't know. And that's a big change. That's a big change for any kid going from high school to college, but for these kids it's a huge change because they are so used to everything being taken care of, and now they've got to take care of it. And we can't really talk to their parents about it unless they give us permission.
Larry has another question.
Follow-up to that question is, would it be helpful to write a form letter for teachers?
You can, and that would be fine. The teachers are not required to provide any accommodations unless they are registered in our office and the accommodations come from Dawn. That is a legal document, the accommodations that we do every semester. So if you don't have one of those, it's your choice whether you want to provide the accommodation. Legally, you do not have to. So a form letter would be great for you to know. However, any legal accommodations that are required would need to be coming from Dawn, which means they need to register in our office.
Zoe, if you can speak on that.
I can.
Okay.
I just had a couple of comments. One is that I've known of a couple of situations where people suffered miserably in high school, especially with social rejection.
Yeah.
And there's no one to sit with in the cafeteria, and you can't get a friend, and all of that. And one person I have in mind particularly shined in college because there was no longer that awareness of being rejected.
Or just class
Felt so much better in being able to, you don't have these cliques so much, and it was very, very good, and took some courses repeatedly, but has moved on from that 2-year degree. And I thought that was wonderful. And another thing I wanted to share is a couple of years ago, I just by chance went to a theater on May 12th, which was National Autism Day, and they were showing a film called Wretches and Jabberers. And it's amazing. This was about 2 adult men who had been institutionalized all of their life, and they made a film. And they went around the world and reaching out to other people on the spectrum. And I would encourage you, just for me, as a professor, I love knowing what's possible. And one of the things that I got from that was if you just go and search Wretches and Jabberers, you can go to their website, and they blog. And you talked about a sense of humor, amazing, And so I don't think we understand autism as much as is out there, and nor do we really understand intelligences to the extent that we can. So I would encourage everybody to see the other side. And these are adults, males, obviously, but wow, you've seen that. So it's incredible. It's on YouTube, and you can just see the trailer. Go to their website and look. They'll probably blog every day what's going on. So it's amazing, insightful. The big barrier was the way to communicate. Mm-hmm. It was storyboards and things like that, but actually, now they have the method. It's
what you're saying about the students, I've noticed I've been here 14 years. I don't think I have ever seen a student be mean or ugly to any of the kids here with disabilities, and it's amazing. And there's something that happens between senior year of high school and freshman year of college where people are kind. Everyone that I've seen here are so kind to our kids. Even the one that's throwing a huge temper tantrum in class, throwing his backpack, I've seen kids come over and say, are you okay? Can I help you? Hi, my name is whatever. What can I do to calm you down? It's super nice. I don't know what happens between that summer. Something happens over that summer. And the faculty, too, here is very, very kind, I feel. Very helpful. Mm-hmm.
I guess my question is, to register with autism in Office of Disabilities, do they have to have had a test or some sort of...
They have to have documentation. Anybody that registers in the disability office has to have documentation, and that's more than just a prescription pad where the doctor's written out, this kid has ADHD or this kid has autism. We need testing either from the public schools where they did the actual testing, that it's called a FIE, a full and individual evaluation, needs to be within the last 5 years. Or if you've had psychological testing or psychiatric testing, those kind of things from a doctor where there's a report, we need a copy of that. And they do need to be within the last 5 years. Our public schools, really because of Dawn, I think, are doing a really good job of keeping that testing updated. So, their senior year, they're required to do the testing in public schools every 3 years. So sometimes we'll say that they did it their sophomore year. Well, they really don't need to do it again their senior year, but now they are. They're doing it to get them ready for the next 5 years. If you do it their senior year, they've got 5 years, which will get them through college with this updated testing.
One thing that I thought about too is testing's really expensive.
It is.
And there are probably a lot more students with disabilities than have had testing, and it's always a dilemma, like you were saying. If you're heavily insured, or school district's doing it.
Yeah, that's really why I think it's so important. If you're in public school and you're under the umbrella of special ed or 504, to get that testing done your senior year, really make it an issue to get that done so that you have it, because it's super expensive to do. Somebody else, it was on the same email, I just remembered, there was another question that said, how do you advise a student who's seeking a degree path that may not be best suited to the person's professional presentation or expectations of the chosen profession? And we've had this happen a couple of times. Honestly, we can't tell a student that you can't major in something. You can't be a teacher because of blah, blah, or you can't be a coach because of blah, blah. You can't major in this. Can't tell them that. All we can do is try to provide, what I like to do is try to get them over to the Career Center and do that, what's the name of that? My Plan, yes. To do that and really talk to them about answering from deepest, darkest part of them, the answers to these, so you don't skew it, and try to get them to look at what their outcomes are, maybe talk about the working environment that they're planning on going into. But as far as I understand, I may be wrong, you can ask Dawn, but as far as I understand, we cannot tell somebody you cannot major in this because of your disability. Which is frustrating because sometimes you can see the writing on the wall, how this is going to play out. But
That's the way all of us are, though. If we really want something, so I hate to dash their
exactly.
enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they can do it.
Yeah.
Any students have questions? Go ahead.
Well, once they're in your program, what are the benefits of them getting from being in that program and signed up to it?
In the disability office, what that does is, like I said, the classroom can't change the structure of the classroom or the expectations of the classroom, but what it does is it kind of levels the playing field. So let's say if you're dyslexic and you can't read your test, then we can provide a reader for you for your tests or your quizzes. And that levels the playing field. Everybody else can read it themselves, I'll read it to you. Or if you have a student that, let's say, is a quadriplegic and can't, or for whatever reason, doesn't have control enough of the hand to be able to write, and let's say you're in English class and you have to do an in-class essay, I'll write it for you. Everybody else writes it themselves, I'll write it for you. It levels the playing field. You're playing the same game everybody else is playing. If you have ADHD or autism, and it's very distracting for you to take a test in class, or the time constraints of it are very upsetting to you, then you can go take your test in the testing center and you can get time and a half on your test, and everybody else can take it in class. So what we try to do is level the playing field, so you're playing the same game, but you've got to read all the chapters everybody else does, you've got to take all the tests everybody else does, you've got to answer all the questions on the homework everybody else does.
So I have this question from a parent. So per se they live in the dorm, and like they need food. How are they able to go get food, or like is there any benefits from the dorms? Because some parents are afraid of their children to drive.
What do you mean to get food?
I had a tour, and the mother asked if he lives in the dorms, is there a way for somebody to help him buy groceries or help him do stuff?
Activities of daily living are in public school. Usually you would have an attendant or an aide that would help you if you had that level of need, but in college that is something the family has to provide themselves. We've had some kids that were in wheelchair or paraplegic, when they were in or maybe they have a lot of personal needs. In public school, they had an aide that took care of that, but we don't provide any of that. So if you need any of that, you're going to need to hire an aide yourself. What we do is all academic.
I think Kate can shed some light on that question.
Actually, if you have a student in the dorm, regardless of whether they have a need because of a disability, a physical disability, or like our foster care alumni kids who are transitioning into independent living, or just a student in need, they are supposed to come to the Office of Student Life, and then they are supposed to be assisted. Either we made it so that if a student has a need, then someone is going to take them, or maybe a group of students actually, who have no transportation. You know, they may take them to the grocery store or Walmart to get those things. Now, if the student has a disability, as long as food service is open, they have that. But just like every other student down there, when food service isn't open, you know, some students don't have the means to avail themselves of that. So we've worked that out. It's not a highly publicized thing, except that Faith is aware of it, John Turntime is aware of it, Doug is aware of it, Phyllis is supposed to refer those students, but they have to make themselves known.
Yeah, self-report, yeah. Yeah. What else? Who are the OT students in here?
Unfortunately, the OTA students did not show up.
Oh,
They were
okay.
supposed to come with the instructor. This would have been very beneficial for them to be able to fill in some of these questions.
Well, I can go talk to them another time.
Yes, I will arrange for you to connect with them. But again, OTA, or occupational therapy, what they do is helping people with activities of daily living. It is imperative, you know, to have this diagnosis at a very early age before you become an adult, and then the parents can then solicit or seek the help of occupational therapists to work with those kids. Sometimes they follow them up. You know, they can retain a private occupational therapist that can help them function a little better while they're still in college. So there are a lot of resources available, but you just have to know how to tap into them. But the earlier the better before the age of 18.
Yeah, their brain is very malleable in those first couple of years. My son had OT from, he was probably 15 months old till probably about 15. He did OT, and it was amazing, amazing. And it was, I was telling Dr. Ebay this morning, it was amazing to watch the activities that they would do, and I'm thinking, that looks like play. And it kind of was play, but it had a very specific purpose and a very neurological purpose that I couldn't see. To me, it looked like they were swinging on a swing, and then they were bouncing a ball. You know? But it was very, very, very purposeful and meant to mold the brain or reshape the brain or expand the brain. It was amazing. I mean, I really can't say enough about how
And
wonderful
teaching
it
them
was.
transitioning from one
Yeah.
activity
Oh, yeah,
to
yeah.
another, because they couldn't be here if they didn't know how to make transitions.
Yeah.
Kristen?
I just thought of something. So we make accommodations for the students. What about, I don't know if we have any employees on the spectrum. I would think with faculty and staff the size that we have, there probably are some. Are there accommodations that can be made for the employees who may be on the spectrum?
It's very possible. That is something I do not know, but I'm sure Dawn does. So if you want me to find out for you, I can, or you can ask her directly. But I'm sure ADA-wise that there are accommodations that are available for them. I'm just not sure.
Let me also chime in on that. If they identify themselves to be within the spectrum, they will have to tell that to HR, and HR will give provision for them to accommodate.
Yes.
Okay, so this kind of goes along with the lines of accommodating somebody who is quadriplegic or anything else along those lines. As somebody who is living with dwarfism, is there anything that you guys do on campus that accommodates for somebody who has dwarfism? Because like the basic things of washing your hands in the bathroom, the sinks are too far back, or people put soap dispensers that are in the mirrors, which
You
I
can't
don't
reach.
really understand.
Whatever. Yeah, we can. accommodate you. What you would need to do is register with Dawn, talk about the issues. You know, some things that's pretty standard. Nobody's standard, but you know, if you're ADHD, these are usually the things that you know you have an issue with that we can help you with. We kind of already know. But if you have something that we don't deal with all the time, maybe dwarfism, I'm going to go talk to Dawn, get a meeting with her, and say, these are the issues that I have. What can you do to help me? And then we can craft a plan within the law that, you know, doesn't require changing the classroom or changing, you know, the content that has to be done to pass the class. For you, it sounds like more like just environmental.
It's the basic needs of, like, we're not able to reach things, so
Right.
stools.
Yeah, see, we could do
stools
something like
needed
that.
around, or even light switches.
Yeah.
I know there's a bunch of different
Yeah.
accommodations. I know a lot of the lights here are motion censored, but even light switches or stools, or not being able to reach stuff in the library, or i.e. all the above. It's just the basic everyday needs that we, as people living with dwarfism, can't do.
Right.
And a lot of people asking people for help who are of average height don't want to always help accommodate somebody who is with dwarfism. So it's just not living on campus, but going about on campus.
Right.
As
Getting
people
about.
folks.
Yeah, I would definitely make an appointment with Dawn, talk to her about what kind of things can be done, you know, what your specific issues are, and then we'll accommodate them. We do accommodations for people like that need special desks. We'll figure out what their schedule is. We'll get in touch with the maintenance department. We'll put the request in. Dawn and I'll go check before school starts. Every classroom that person has a class in, and make sure that special desk is there. We've had peanut allergies before, where every classroom that student was in is a no peanut zone. There's signs everywhere. You know, we have the desk and the chairs before school starts, and it breaks, completely washed and sanitized. You know, because peanut allergies can be deadly. So there's all kinds of things we can do. We just need to talk with you and figure out what your specific issues are, and then figure out what we need to do to address it.
Okay, I would like you to follow up with Dawn, or you might even stay and work with her
Yeah.
in Dawn's office after this forum, okay? And if you want to champion this cause too with other students, please do. And if you need my help to move it forward, come to my office. We'll make sure that we see through to that, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Very good. More questions?
I have handouts. I'll put them up here if you want one. You can come get one.
Let me ask you questions. They are questions.
Okay, ask a question.
The question is, of course, you mentioned ADA and ADHD, and there are a lot of other mental disorders. A lot of times when we hear mental disorders, we think of the worst. What we are talking about today is mental disorder, you know, and things like OCD, and how people with OCD, how do we differentiate their spectrum from that of ASD?
So you're wanting to know how to look at OCD if someone just has that by themselves, or autism with OCD?
This is correct.
Right. OCD, if someone has that, it definitely interferes with their daily living, you know, whether it's hand washing or counting or, you know, walking a certain way, or you have to walk through a door 3 or 4 times, you know, whatever it is. It definitely impairs your daily life, but all the other characteristics of autism won't be there, like not getting jokes or literal interpretation of things or problems working in groups, although that could be complete introverts like me and, you know, hate it. You know, but, you know, generally it's just that OCD thing that defines their issues. Whereas autism, you're going to have all those other issues, and then generally you may have a little OCD on top of that, which helps them, I think, with my son, I think it helps him quell his anxieties about his life kind of being out of control. You know, nothing's predictable. Nothing, or especially if something's unpredictable, like us going on a vacation last week, you know, his whole schedule was disrupted. So those kind of issues ramped up, where he had to have things done a certain way, and if I didn't do them a certain way, I had to start over, and we had to do it again. And so that's really the difference for me. And I'm obviously not a psychologist or a counselor, but for someone just with OCD, that's what you see, but all the other things are fairly okay. With autism, you're going to have all this other stuff and the OCD on top of that.
Thank you. Any other question?
I haven't seen the DSM in years. Did they leave the term savant
I have no
on
idea.
that spectrum anywhere?
I have no
Yeah,
idea.
They left it out.
Okay,
It's not in it, yeah.
okay.
They left it out. It's something that keep morphing. They tend to change it and update it every couple of years. They remove few things. Yeah, even right now, Aspergers and the high-end autism are classified as one.
Right.
And they are being moved, in fact, they are trying to separate them away from the actual ASD, syndrome.
Right.
And pervasive disorder, they're trying to separate that too. So it keeps on morphing. What I suggest is that when we see students or children with these various spectrums, if they're still under age, maybe have their parents or to initiate some professional diagnosis. Maybe they can come up with a definitive diagnosis. And sometimes the diagnosis might not be right initially, then changes. Do you grow out of autism? The answer is probably no, but you can make some life adjustment or modification that in your head you think that you've outgrown it, but it's still there in some other ways.
Yeah, I think as especially the higher end kids with spectrum disorders, as they get older, they mature, and they've hopefully had a lot of therapies, and they've learned some coping mechanisms to function. Doesn't mean that their life is easy or it's, that there's still not issues, but, you're always going to have autism. I mean, some people can tell you they cure it, that's fine. But really, you're going to have it. and you just may be able to cope better with it, in my opinion.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Three different articles down here. One is teaching college students with autism spectrum disorders. One is about theory of mind. And one is called Why High Functioning Autism is So Challenging.
Hopefully, if you have questions regarding any of these students in your classroom, you know how to get help now. Just on a very quick note, before we discuss, April, again, I have to remind you guys that in the month of April, we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Architect Fine Arts. There are a lot of events that are scheduled for the whole month of April. Almost every Saturday. April 7th, we have the celebration of the American Songbook. And of course, April 9th, we have the students' reception in the Texas Hall for the Art. And between April 12th and April 14th, there's going to be the celebration of what they call In the Woods. It's a play that was performed some 20 years ago when the Architect Theater was originally opened. And of course, Vice President Mike Indy will be performing in that show, so to make an effort to see him perform. Also on April 17th, we have the Spring Choir Concert. April 20th, we have the New Orleans Gumbo Kings. And of course, April 27th, we have Nothing But the Blues and so many other things. And then the last one, April 28th, the Jazz Band. So a lot of events. Look at the WC, go to the WC site and check out all these events. Some of them will cost you money. Most of them are free. So try to support these programs.
You can also join the Weatherford College Fine Arts group on Facebook. And if you join that group, I already have all of these events up, but you'll get an event invitation on your Facebook account. And if you click that you're interested or going, Facebook will then give you notifications so you don't forget.
And there are employee discounts.
That's true. Very good. All right. Again, if it is the last Monday of the month, it is the Dean's Forum. Thank you very much, and God bless.